Hey everyone, welcome back to the yearly video where I complain about something in the music industry, I guess. As many of you already know, music in its various mediums are very important to me, and I can't understate how much love I have for collecting and listening to vinyl records. And while yeah, we do have access to millions of albums through streaming, the vinyl experience tops it completely for me. I mean, you've got the big album covers, the collectability, the various extras and colors, and most of the time, the sound quality is even better than streaming. And sure, the prices, especially nowadays, are not cheap, and many are taking advantage of their fans like I talked about in last year's video, but I love pretty much everything else about the hobby. And there really is no other feeling like going into a record store, finding a record that you've been wanting for a long time for a good price, and taking it home and falling in love with it all over again. Ooh, it's an original French pressing? Yeah, I'm getting this now. But you know, one album that I've been wanting recently has been The Mollusk by Ween. I mean, it's got Ocean Man on it after all, but I haven't seen any copies in stores recently, so I guess I'll commit the immortal sin and check Amazon for it. I mean, I'm sure they have a couple copies in stock. Okay, well that's kind of odd. I guess I can check Discogs too. I mean, they always have records in stock. What the hell are these prices? And these reviews. Looks pristine, plays like garbage. Bought brand new and sounds like shit. Lots of pops and clicks on my brand new copy. Plain recording pressings are such a crapshoot. Oh, no wonder. This video is about Plain Recordings, the worst record label ever. Probably. Now I should probably start by stating that I'm not just going to be talking about Plain Recordings in this video, as they are just a sub-label of their parent company, Rant. If you go to Rant's severely outdated website, which I don't recommend visiting without a VPN, Rant is a small record label group founded in 1996, and since September of 2007 is part of City Hall Records. City Hall Records manufactures, distributes, and markets releases on their in-house imprints, such as Four Men with Beards, DBK Works, Plain Recordings, and Water. We should probably replace the is's with was, as the company seemed to go out of business at the beginning of the decade. Out of all of the in-house imprints listed on Rant's website, we're mainly going to focus on the aforementioned Plain Recordings and Four Men with Beards. And no, I have no idea why they chose the blandest names possible. One of these labels is literally named Water. On the website, Four Men with Beards is simply stated as one of the preeminent vinyl reissue labels in the world. Yeah, that gives a lot of information. But they mainly seem to reissue a lot of classic artists, like Television, Tim Buckley, Funkadelic, and you know, only Nina f***ing Simone, and Plain Recordings focused more on indie and alternative rock bands, including My Bloody Valentine, Spiritualized, Mr. Bungle, Fiona Apple, Ween, Primus, who suck by the way, Low, Sparkle Horse, Elliott Smith, Mazzy Star, The Flaming Lips, Cat Power, Hole. How the hell did these guys get the rights to so many artists? Well, I'll tell you how. By cheating them out. A little over a year ago, I finally got my hands on this amazing Spiritualized record, Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space. This is a reissue from late 2020, seemingly after Plain Recordings kicked the bucket. And what's interesting about this is that on the sticker that came out of the front of the packaging, it states, "First artist-approved vinyl reissue of Spiritualized 1997 symphonic rock masterpiece." And on this recent reissue of this Primus album, the sticker states, "First official vinyl pressing since 1996. I'm starting to notice a bit of a pattern here. So essentially the pressings from labels like Plain and Four Men with Beards weren't done with the artist's permission and didn't have any other input. This is especially evident in a Pitchfork interview from 2012 with My Bloody Valentine's Kevin Shields. In this interview he stated, "In America, Warner Bros. Licensed Loveless and Isn't Anything to Plain Records, and they basically just ripped the audio off the CD and put it onto vinyl. They did an awful, terrible job. It was done without my permission, and the sound quality was 100% wrong. It was a ripoff to anyone who bought it, but I didn't know anything about it until they were in shops." Wow, the music industry sucks. Shields even set up an injunction to prevent these records from being imported to the UK, essentially calling them bootlegs even if they were slightly legal in the US. And when Alan Sparhawk of the band Low was asked about a vinyl reissue on Twitter, he responded that UMG kept licensing the rights to crappy reissue companies and that he saw none of the money made from them. This is obviously a giant shame. Some of the albums pressed by these labels are considered some of the greatest albums within their respective genres, if not all time. So the fact that these artists put their hearts and souls into these projects and don't even get the proper recognition is just beyond a shame. And if artists getting ripped off wasn't bad enough, Both Shields and Sparhawk both call these records terrible and crappy, so do records from these labels sound crappy? 8 times out of 10, yes. For this section of the video, I've compiled about 10 albums that were pressed by Plain and Formative Beards. And I'm going to read a couple of reviews for each pressing off of Discogs, which is a database for both physical and digital music releases. First I have the Plain pressing of I Could Live in Hope by Low, which desperately needs a repressing. Think twice before you spend hundreds on this LP. I bought it new several years ago and thought it was a decent pressing given Plain's reputation, which is true, but then I got the original US CD, and the Plain vinyl is simply the CD pressed to LP. Yeah, not surprised there. Will this ever see an official reissue? I sure hope so. I just refuse to buy anything that Plain Recordings does now. Sad that this record hasn't yet gotten the proper reissue remaster with the love and care it truly deserves. Yep, totally agree. There are actually some pretty positive reviews on here, which isn't too surprising considering how Low are a very stripped down group, but still, there's a lot of bad reviews too. Don't buy this, it's rubbish. Buy a good old CD instead or wait for a good reissue. Alrighty then. Alright, up next we have Laser Guided Melodies by Spiritualized. Stay away from this terrible reissue. Poor quality. Bought this reissue and had to exchange it due to a skip on the opening track, and crackles and pops all over the place. Played the new exchanged record only to find the exact same skip, crackles and pops in the exact same spots. Great. Not only is the quality poor, but disc 1 plays at the wrong speed. Oh my god. Bought a sealed copy, there's a good amount of pops throughout, even after running a brush over the record. Plain equals pain equals runt equals 4 bearded hipsters equals what in an empire of dirt. Alright, up next I have the pressing of California by Mr. Bungle, and this one has the worst reviews yet. As far as I can tell, Plain Recordings are only really good at making expensive and inefficient frisbees. Bought this record, returned it the next day, one of the greatest disappointments in my life. Terrible sound quality, groove distortion, vinyl imperfection, oh my god. Huge letdown. Unluckily, I blindly bought their 3 releases under this pressing, and the 3 are just as bad, no wonder they were cheap. Sounds terrible. Pops, static, everywhere, even on louder parts. Why is it even going up in price? Don't bother with this pressing. Now, while a lot of these have horrible reviews like we've already seen, some of these actually do have some decent reviews. Like this pressing of God Ween Satan by Ween. I'm impressed the sound and pressing is pretty good. I may have gotten lucky. I recently picked up the Mollusk and it is a travesty. Then I remembered I had this pressing, and it actually sounds really good. The sound quality is decent, unlike other Plain presses. And then we have this pressing of Pork Soda by Primus. Plain Recording gets a bad rap, but this actually doesn't sound too bad. Rocks. Nice sound coming from this reissue. I don't really understand the hate on this pressing, everything sounds good to me. So now why don't we go ahead and look at some Formative Beards pressings. This is a pressing by Adventure by Television. Sound quality is good, but there is a lot of surface noise sound and it's quite annoying. This press is genuinely terrible. Glory sounded decent on my version, but the further you get into the A side, the more it becomes flat. Next we have Maggot Brain by Funkadelic. Bad quality, not funky. Do not buy this reissue unless your ears are full of shit. One of the worst vinyl reissues I've heard. Definitely digitally sourced, possibly from the 2005 remaster. Mixing and mastering is really awful. Disappointed with this release, not much in the way of clicks and pops, but the tape hiss is really bad. Although there were a couple pressings with decent reviews, it's still pretty clear that neither of these labels were of the highest quality. But you may be thinking, why are you knocking on this label so hard? I mean, you shouldn't knock it until you try it, and fair point. And before I even made this video, I did already own one Plain Recordings record. This is a Plain reissue of The Curtain is the Cast by Low, one of my favorite records from the band. So you may think, well, it's gotta sound like garbage then. I mean, if you spent this much time crapping on this label, it's gotta sound terrible. No. This is a really good sounding record. It's one of the few pressings that has a lot of good reviews from Plain Recordings, and I echo them. However, this doesn't really feel fair. If I really wanted to know how bad Plain Recordings could be, I should probably listen to a record with nowhere near positive reviews, right? So since I already own repressings of these two Spiritualized albums, why don't I check out the Plain pressing for the record that came out in between them? This is the Plain reissue of Pure Phase, and yeah, I can't beat these prices. It also has reviews such as, Yet Another Plain Recordings Tragedy, sounds CD sourced. The sleeve is nice, but the pressing is comically terrible. Tons of noise, and both records really off-center. And thank God for the Spaceman reissue program so nobody has to buy the Plain rubbish. Goodbye $20.24. I've given this record about 3 full listens over the past couple of days, and it's not the worst record I've ever heard, but that's the nicest thing I can say about it. When the album is quiet with only a few instruments, it sounds okay, but once more instruments come in and it gets louder, it just sounds like you took the sound file and threw it into a hydraulic press. It just sounds completely flat. Calling it lifeless seems like a bit of a stretch, but it certainly didn't wow me in any way. It's borderline acceptable, and that's the best way I can put it. So yeah, I'm disappointed by a plain reissue. What a surprise! But thankfully, the band have managed to get the rights back to their first 4 albums and have faithfully reissued all of them, and they have gotten a lot better reviews compared to the plain pressings. And other artists like My Bloody Valentine, Fiona Apple, and Primus have also gotten their rights back. However, many of the other artists mentioned haven't had their records reissued since the closure of Rant, so why is that? Let me go on a rant real quick. One thing that I hadn't mentioned when talking about the Kevin Shields interview was the behavior from labels like Sony and Warner. Not only had the licenses been sold to Plain recordings without the band's permission, but when Shields agreed to work with Sony to remaster all their material, Sony went in total breach of contract and prevented Shields from doing it by hiding the master tapes. And while Shields was eventually able to get the rights back, other bands weren't so lucky. Going back to the band Low, Universal Music Group have been holding the rights to their first 3 albums hostage for years now, and although Low have tried to renegotiate with UMG, they end up nowhere. When a fan asked Alan about the albums possibly being licensed to Numero Group, an actually good reissue company, he said that since they're a much smaller band compared to groups like Blondie, they're hardly worth pulling for, and he doesn't know what else to do. This is just heartbreaking. It's pretty easy to tell that Alan wants these to be reissued and wants everyone to have a copy. And this just makes companies like UMG look like giant manipulative bullies, because you know what reasons they have for keeping these albums hostage? None. They haven't done anything with these albums in over 10 years, and they clearly don't show any interest in doing anything with them. And you may think, isn't this exactly what Taylor Swift got caught up in? She just re-recorded her albums and actually owns the rights to them. Can't these artists do the same? Well, here's the thing. Taylor Swift is Taylor Swift. She's the biggest artist in the world right now, so if anyone can re-record all of her material, it's gonna be her. As for bands stuck with Rant reissues, many of them are much smaller acts and can't even afford to make more music. And unfortunately for many artists, even if they could re-record their albums, many aren't here with us anymore to do so. Mimi Parker, one of the vocalists for Low, passed away in 2022. And Mark Linkous, the lead singer for Sparkle Horse, passed away in 2010. Artists like these and many more deserve to be celebrated for the art they've created, but thanks to greedy companies like UMG, they'll never be truly celebrated unless someone coughs up a small fortune. They could show a little bit of humanity and allow these artists to make money off of what they themselves made, but instead, these companies have decided to be the villain and continue to hold these albums in order to prevent losing 0.0000001% of their yearly income. Fuck UMG. Well, I'm pretty pissed off now. Not that I'm surprised or anything. So, if there's one message that I want to give out, it's to support your favorite artists as much as you can. Sure, most large artists are rich as hell and have plenty of fans, but for much smaller acts, fan support can mean everything to them. In the age of streaming, artists barely make anything off of album sales anymore, so if you're able to do so, see them in concert or buy their physical releases as well. And for artists like Low who can't do anything about their albums, make their voices as well as yours loud and clear. If bands like My Bloody Valentine and Spiritualize can get their albums back, maybe with a little help, other artists can too. So with that, thank you all for watching, and take care. Guaranteed high fidelity. You lied to me.